Serious, who was the worst coworker you ever had? One I hired. She was our neighbor, a young mother whose husband was a truck driver. I knew they struggled with finances, had been evicted from past apartments, gone to their church for help with food and utilities, etc. When she told me she was laid off from her job at a bank, I hired her at the store I managed. It was the beginning of the busy season and I figured that would give her a few months to get back on her feet while she looked for something back in banking. Instead, she worked for me less than 2 weeks. In that time, she stole from the register and another employee was late twice and quit by leaving her uniforms balled up in a grocery bag with a note saying she just couldn't do it anymore. That chick was an A1 scam artist, and I held a grudge against her for a long time. Probably the guy I fired once for stealing. GM reversed my decision. Fired him again for walking out on the job. Again the GM reversed my decision. Oh, and he was facing prison time for nearly murdering his 15-month-old niece for crying. I believe he's locked up now. I worked in a bookstore. We had a cafe and the cafe manager was my worst coworker ever. She was nice and all but so unhygienic. We'd had to discuss more than once not using the dish sink in the cafe's back room to bathe herself in. She always smelled slightly sour. Well, one day, while covering the cafe manager's break, an employee discovered a pair of freshly stained underwear that she'd washed in the dish sink hanging off the counter in the cafe's back room. She got fired for that one. Edit. She was not homeless. I'd driven her home more than once when her car was totaled, and from what we were told she owned her home. Other issues? Maybe. Couldn't say and I won't speculate, but regardless, it isn't a minimum wage employee's job to look out for their bosses who make twice as much as they do. IDK how she even got promoted. Honestly, I will say she was promoted a few months before the general manager was fired and replaced, and then she was fired by the new GM after this event. He was 17 at the time. We'll call him Jerry. We were working in a grocery store when I met him. Jerry wanted so bad to be a bodybuilder, bro. He idolized The Rock. He spent countless hours in the gym every day. He woke up at 4 AM to run 5k, only slept for 20-minute increments throughout the day because that's what Marines do, and he made sure everyone knew about his no excuses attitude. And all he ever did was complain and make excuses. Jerry would give speeches about hard work and dedication, and whatever other BS he obviously pulled from a motivational Instagram that day. He really did put time in at the gym though. He had the arms and chest to show it. But if you gave the kid a basic task, he was useless. Cleaning the bathrooms, he left stains and toilet paper everywhere. Stocking shelves, product was always facing the wrong way or in the wrong spot. Offering additional assistance to customers, he never bothered, always got yelled at, and never changed. Even just consistently working was an issue for Jerry because he had to stop like every hour to eat a snack or drink a Monster. For some reason Jerry thought I was his friend, and he would always complain to me when he got yelled at by management. He made up this conspiracy theory that management hated him and wanted to see him fail. According to him, he was never actually freaking up. Management was just bullying him. He would say shoot, like they are just jealous. They don't work as hard as me, and that makes them jealous. Jerry lived in a fantasy land that was a product of too many quotes he probably got from some bodybuilding calendar. Eventually Jerry quit because he was tired of the bullshit, and he went to work in fast food under his older brother. Jerry got fired by his older brother. Jerry tried joining the military, but apparently couldn't hack it. Tried becoming a cop, but couldn't hack it. Now he's a valet at the local mega church, and he recently turned 25. He'll probably get fired or quit there too. He stole from people, would let himself in uninvited to homes, groom and prey on teens 13 to 17, harassed a girl for years, and pulled a knife out on her when she rejected him, and more. He didn't get the boot until years later because he was such a good worker. The guy's in his mid to late 30s and still does this shoot working not far from a middle school and his former workplace. When any of the above happened, the higher ups would say he never acted like around me and would ignore the situation. Worked at an Americanized Japanese fast casual restaurant. We used to cook these gigantic pots of noodles. Like, you better use proper lifting procedures or you'll hurt yourself. It was a daily affair. From the stove they get tossed in an ice bath and then portioned into roughly 1 million individual bags. Obviously nobody liked doing it, but it had to be done. This one kid, who always sucked, slow, late, dumb, complained, just generally bad, decided that if he just poured them down the garbage disposal he wouldn't have to portion them. Not including the water, it was probably 40 pounds of noodles, 18 kilograms. Well, it clogged the pipes to such an extent that floor drains across the back of house started flooding, and we couldn't use the dishwasher or drain sinks. And guess what? We just cooked more freaking noodles. I know it's not the biggest deal, but the selfishness required to destroy product/property, screw our shift over, really screw the next shift over, and the stupidity to think nobody would notice, just to escape some tedium, when he was going to be in the building all day anyway, just boggles my mind. I would prefer to work with the aggressive felon who would threateningly coerce co-workers into seeing his shooty metal band perform afternoon shows at strip clubs. Thank you very much. She was actually a very nice person, but she made my job so much more difficult. When I was a new graduate vet at my first job, there was another new vet working there as well. Now, I have some self-esteem and confidence issues myself, but she was something else. For months, she'd come find me for nearly literally every other consult to get me to examine her animal to make sure she didn't miss anything, or talk to her clients, because she wasn't able to say things like no, this doesn't need antibiotics to them. I was effectively doing two jobs half the time. It got even worse when one senior vet got sick and the other quit, so it was literally just me and her at what was supposed to be a 4-vet practice for 6 weeks. I work with a rockstar employee. This means they're freaking brilliant, but a nightmare to work with. They frequently forget to attend meetings, work hours that piss off everyone else. They're a complete hypocrite when it comes to working standards, bitch about everyone else, piss off their co-workers by their constant, but mostly valid complaining, and can't follow the simple rules everyone else in the company has to follow. Unfortunately, they're absolutely amazing at their core job and we'd be fricked without them, because our workplace is obsessed with hiring cheap overqualified. So we suck it up and have them contribute in a different way to our already stupidly toxic environment. Why the frick haven't I left this shoot show of a company yet? My manager. After break a girl didn't come back, and I asked why, and my manager said it was because her grandfather passed away, and then said she could have at least finished her shift. Ed. Guy had my name in his diary notebook, listed under people that need to be taught a lesson. He was fired immediately, and I wasn't allowed to come and go alone. Roger. He was a software developer. He was very smart and stupendously incompetent in the ways that only really intelligent people can be without everything collapsing around them. Everyone hated him. We cheered when he finally left. He was condescending to the point where he would stand behind people and tell them what to type on their computers. He believed that allocating memory and using locks in multi-threaded code was error prone and the source of junior programmer mistakes. He was a colossal asshole. Years later, another co-worker was getting his security clearance. I got interviewed as a reference. One of the questions was, did the applicant get along with everyone? I said yes, except for one guy. The interview said, I've heard all about Roger, and I don't think I've ever encountered a more universally despised person. He was an Orthodox Jew, which meant that his diet whenever he traveled was really hard to maintain, especially in places like Florida. It made it hard because it really humanized him. Otherwise he was just this giant monochromatic asshole. The subject matter expert who was supposed to be my mentor decided she was threatened by my existence and seized every opportunity to try to get me fired. I didn't get fired. I worked extra hard to figure it all out on my own and eventually got promoted because of it. So frick you, Janet. Job registration. She smelled bad. She never shut up and always talked at maximum volume. Very stupid. Needed a Chevy's waiter to read and explain the menu to her. Needed to keep a list by her workstation to remember how to spell basic words like stomach and heart and emergency. She insulted others based on their appearance and racial stereotypes. She asked me how much I would pay for a laptop. When I asked what kind, she replied, a stolen one. During a snowstorm she bragged that she was a better driver than everyone else and that everyone else is stupid. The next day we hear that she got her car stuck blocking her apartment's parking lot. When she got out of the car, she fell and couldn't get back up. A man tried to help her up, but couldn't lift her. After a second man came to help, she insulted the first guy and said he wasn't a man because he was too weak to lift her. She weighed at least 300 pounds. She was fired for sending a person with weakness and chest pain home to get his insurance card. Luckily the hospital's shuttle bus driver recognized him coming back out of the air and was like, "Wait, weren't you having a heart attack?" She was suspected of stealing copays. She supposedly marched elderly patients to the ATM in the lobby and forced them to pay cash so she could pocket it. This is unconfirmed and we only heard about it after she was fired. Seriously, frick that woman. Had a girl starting her PhD in the lab I worked. She was the embodiment of entitled, lazy and spoiled. She come late, leave early, do next to no work and constantly complained she needed more money. After a while we all just hated her, mostly due to the fact that while we all worked our asses off, she did next to nothing but bosses didn't seem to care at all and just let her hang around in the lab for years. When the time came to hand in her thesis we were all curious what she hand in, since she basically hadn't done any work. I was convinced she somehow weasel her way out of it like she had done all the time. I was convinced that when you can pull off being in a lab for years doing no work, but noon fires you, you must be somehow a bit clever to pull that off. But nope, she failed so spectacularly like I never seen anyone fail before or since. So no to everyone. You can be lazy and stupid, you can only be one of the two. Update, since a few people asked, here's how she failed. It was a combination of shortcomings. One issue was really basic admin stuff. Things like not sticking to the required format, not handing in additional documents which were required and or not sticking to deadlines when it came to handing in the written thesis itself. And apparently she wanted to hand in her thesis without checking back with her advisors/pies. When they did get the thesis to check, turned out the content of what she had written was apparently not exactly up to scratch. As far as I know, they gave her another few months to fix all the shortcomings, giving her a new deadline, but she never handed anything in. We had a dude who made sexual comments about a 16-year-old at my last job and this woman is still more infuriating than he was. We worked overnight at an assisted living facility and because most of the residents were asleep we were able to do some cleaning during this time. I'm a grown adult, so I know how to clean and sanitize. Every single night without fail she would check on my work and would always have something to complain about. Examples include her bringing me a dry vent to show me I hadn't cleaned it out properly because a piece, if lint less than the size of a fingernail clipping was still attached, asking me to tie on garbage bags a super insanely specific way that she never felt I did right, and her favorite single crumbs she found in remote corners of areas I vacuumed. I know what you're thinking, and no I wasn't lazy and am not exaggerating. She would try to yell at me for singular crumbs. The most insane thing though was her obsession with spraying the furniture with surface cleaner. We had lots of fabric covered chairs and sofas and pillows in the lobbies and she would spray them down with the cleaner and scrub them. She had been told personally by our boss not to do this, but decided that our boss was wrong and would harass anyone who wasn't doing it. She ruined furniture by doing this and everything was frayed and coming apart, even when it was brand new. She also loved to put bleach absolutely everywhere. She would go through a gallon jug a night cleaning. Eventually I just learned to flat out tell her no and just let her redo my work. No matter how hard you cleaned it wasn't going to be enough for her and she was going to complain. There was a guy I worked with who, while he was fine and good at his job, just didn't bathe. It filled the room. I could tell when he entered the building from the next floor up. Like, how do you tell a superior about washcloths and deodorant? The boss daughter. She was a piece of work. Horribly entitled. You bet. Dunning-Kruger effect on her estimate of her own abilities? Oh yeah. Shitty attitude towards everyone. Goodness yes. She made it clear that she thought everyone who worked there was lazy, stupid, and taking advantage of her father. Also, she was thoroughly convinced that she should be running the business because she would do better than anyone else, including her father. She had an uncanny talent for sniffing out problems, areas where things weren't being done right. At one point, when asked to provide a professional reference for her, I mentioned this in a positive light. The problem was that her idea of a solution to the problem she found was do it right or do it better. The idea that she should help solve the problem she uncovered seemed utterly alien to her. She worked for her dad's business because no one else would hire her. She kept that job because her dad would never fire her. When her father hired her older brother and was openly grooming him to take over the business, then she finally left after securing a generous severance package. I quit a while after that, but last I heard, she was back working at the family business again. Worked with the owner's son at a marketing company. Dude was disgusting. I would say about 400 pounds, wore his pants under his belly, so belly was always hanging out. He had been let go a few years prior to when I started because a co-worker caught him watching porn on his laptop while at work, and he had been rehired about a year after I started. This guy ate gefilte fish for lunch at least 3 days a week, would get sushi and drink the remaining soy sauce. Pants to the floor when he was at the urinal. Just an all-around slob. The last straw was when he pulled out his phone and thought his headphones were plugged in and was blasting some nasty ass pronoun in an office full of people. My friend had to tell him to turn it off. Nothing came of it. I left that place soon after. I used to work at a debt settlement law firm. They were pretty shooty and you were better off handling the debt yourself. But that's beside the point. I worked in data entry with her. She got suspended for a few days for actually tossing the mail rather than processing it. This included settlement offers and up-to-date balances or harassing emails, letters from debtors. But that's not what made her the worst co-worker. Like I mentioned, this was a debt settlement law firm. We took monthly payments from people in order to settle their debt, so we had sensitive banking information to process their payments. Well, she got caught using their information to buy things online. That's right, this woman literally stole money from the poor. People who are already in debt, and she stole from them. The lowest of the low. She went in crying and begging not to fire her. They told her they didn't call her in to fire her. They called her in because the police were outside to arrest her, and they escorted her out of the building and arrested her. My former Grams. He managed to talk his way to the top, but didn't really know anything. He was also a creep who tried to hit on every woman in the office, and would often try to use his position and title to get favors. He made the work environment so toxic that almost 40% of the workforce quit. Still, the owners loved the guy because he knew how to talk his way out. I was already planning to leave, but he made it even easier to go. Last I heard, the company is struggling to hire people and is not doing well, but has still they're collecting a 6-figure salary. I'd like to think he'll get what's coming to him, but life sometimes just doesn't work that way. Someone who, by now, would go as an entitled car. I was still a teenager back then, and it was just a side job for me. I was a sales assistant in a bakery. Or, to be exact, in one store of a bakery chain. I had been there almost a year, worked 2 to 3 times every week, and usually worked alone, closing the store. I knew what I was doing. So did the apprentices who were my age. They hired a part-time worker. We were the age of her children and she treated us as if she had the right to give us orders. Didn't ask if we would clean the glasses, but ordered us to. Didn't do things herself. Knew everything better. No, you can take that cloth for window cleaning. Take the other. We always take the other one. The most horrible one was when I was with a customer and sold them a very big bread, bigger than our paper bags. I put it into 2 bags, not in the plastic bag, as bread really does not belong into plastic bags. In front of the customer, she told me multiple times how what I was doing was wrong and I needed to do it differently and how dumb and wrong it was. I finished the sale and took her back, and I, a 17-year-old, scolded her massively never to do that in front of customers again, and that she had no idea what she was talking about. Why was I so sure? A month before, I had been to a workshop on product sales, professional attire and behavior, promotions, which covered exactly this behavior. The apprentices made her quit after a few months. In a building with 3 floors, he'd use alternate men's rooms each day, never flushing the toilet when he was done. The guy thought it was hilarious to leave it there for all to see, including co-workers on other floors. Even when he was called out on it, the guy persisted, leaving his hash to in plain view and somehow feeling CCKY about it. Bruce wasn't my worst co-worker, but he is the one I have the most stories about. Here's the shortest one. I came into work one day and started printing out a bunch of chapters for a meeting later in the day. I find it's faster to print one copy and use the printer manager to tell the printer to reprint that job 4 times instead of telling it to print 5 times up front. I have the bulk feeder removed because it just causes jams. So the tray empties and needs refilled a few times. Bruce opens up a ream of paper, only to see that there's red marks on almost every sheet of paper he touches. He's getting upset because he thinks we got a batch of flawed paper, like a whole bunch came off the press with ink on it, and they all came to us. I look at the paper for a few seconds. Then I grab Bruce's hand and flip it over. He'd cut his thumb and was bleeding on all the paper. I work in a union environment and am a steward, so I often end up knowing far more about what's going on with employees than management does. And often way more than I really want to. This guy, though, I'd have directed to another steward, because even though I'm there to protect the collective bargaining agreement and not defend the employee, I wanted this dude gone in the worst way. I never represented him, thank God. I started hearing about him from other stewards. First, he didn't apply for different jobs. He was moved, typically with no word on it, which is rare to see even once, much less the 4 times it happened. What I kept hearing was that female co-workers were universally concerned about being alone with him. He was one of those guys that sets predator senses going. Then he got put at my office, and I saw it for myself. I work in human services, and one of the things we're trained for is recognizing abuser patterns. It's one thing to read about it or talk to someone who is living with it, but the first time you see an abusive, manipulative person turn on the charm to relax their target, it's a chilling freaking thing. Let me tell you. He went through about 3 relatively vulnerable women here. Every last one of them thought the girl before couldn't have been right, and that he was the nicest guy. You just don't understand. And so on. He had his hands all over one while they were driving in a government car, had her tits out, etc. And I didn't find out about it until way later. He eventually went to another job, and the last I heard, had gotten embroiled in a 3-way dispute between 2 women he was sleeping with in his unit, causing them both to get divorced, and then came and asked me what I knew. Easily one of the scariest individuals I've ever personally worked with. His eyes were like a shark's, just cold.